everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. The ability for farmers to gauge soil moisture is always critical as they try to plan for crop success. And now the scientists at Mesonet have a new way for you to stay informed. Here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon.
Have you ever wondered if there's enough water in this ground to make sure that the seeds that you planted grow all the way to maturity? Well, actually, there is a new free online tool that can help you find that information out.
So previously, the Mesonet product, the soil moisture product, was fractional water index, and the Mesonet still has that product. Now we have a new product to offer also, and it's the plant available water map for the state. It's a daily updated map for the state.
Researchers traveled to all 77 counties across the state to get over 100 soil samples from each of the 120 Mesonet sites. So the numbers that are produced are accurate to Oklahoma's different soil types.
So what this gave us was a really detailed coverage of the state and the type of soils that we have at the Mesonet stations. And then we brought those back to the lab and we ran several different tests on those to get the physical properties of the soil so that we could interpret the sensor output that the Mesonet already provides. So this great data is now able to be interpreted into the plant available water. The measurements that were taken were the water content at different pressures, and then we have the soil texture at each of the sites, and we combine this together with some equations, and that's what it enables us to interpret that data.
And a fundamental difference is the plant available water accounts for the soil differences from one site to the next, number one. Number two, it gives us a unit that we can understand. It's amount of water in inches. So just like we're used to thinking about precipitation in inches or crop water use in inches, now we have a measure of the water in the soil in inches.
And think of it this way. This is the soil. The sponge is going to absorb all the water that it can whenever we get a rain. Say that's a nice 3-inch rain. Now everything left over will be represented in the plant available water. Now one thing to remember, whenever you're looking at the plant available water map, say the 16-inch one, that represents all of the water from the topsoil down to 16 inches. It's not just the moisture at that depth like in other maps. The plant available water map is not only exciting for Oklahoma's agricultural producers, but also for the people who are helping to conserve the water that is already in the ground.
And so when you're making that decision as to what summer crop you may want to plant, or whether it's canola or whatever crop, having an idea of what the soil moisture is like in that soil profile is very valuable information.
Tyson wants to explain one more thing about all the data that's collected.
We are measuring and reporting the plant available water under the existing vegetation at the Mesonet site, which is not cropland. So these are primarily under grassland type vegetation, and so as you move to different vegetation types, you can expect to have different levels of plant available water because they've had different water use histories. Well, we hope that it'll be useful to producers, especially earlier in the year as they're starting to assess, what's the outlook for the summer. We know it's going to get dry generally during the summer, but in the springtime, there's a lot of uncertainty about what our soil moisture conditions are going to be.
And for a link to the plant available water site, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet Weather Report. Dave Deacon just provided a great interpretation of what plant available water maps show. A map from Wednesday shows how the areas of drier soils from the surface down to 16 inches, colored brown and yellow on our map, are expanding. Two areas of interest are where we have 4 Mesonet locations in 2 different counties, Payne and Oklahoma counties. In Oklahoma County, 3 of the mesonet sites are reporting more than 3 inches of plant available water. Oklahoma City East didn't receive as much rainfall as the others and only has 1 51/100 inches of plant available water. Moving north to Payne County, we see even more variation between mesonet locations. The western 2 sites, Lake Carl, Blackwell, and Marina, are both below an inch. Stillwater has 2 19/100, while Perkins comes in at 1 64/100 inches of plant available water. Cattle are having to adjust to much different conditions this weekend. A mesonet graph of cattle comfort from Wednesday shows how days that were reaching into the high 80s have been replaced with much cooler days, and nighttime lows now dropping into cattle comfort teens. Ranchers will be monitoring their herds for animals showing stress from the sudden change. Gary, what's the latest on our continuing drought?
Good morning, everybody. And as usual lately, I get to start off my segment with a very ugly picture, uglier than this, of course, and that's our drought picture. So let's take a look at the latest U.S. Drought Monitor map released on Thursday. Now we do have some better colors showing up in southern, central, and northeastern Oklahoma, when I'm afraid much of western Oklahoma, including northwestern and north central Oklahoma, still covered by that dark red and maroon color, meaning extreme to exceptional drought. In fact, 67% of Oklahoma still covered by that extreme to exceptional drought, and basically 99% of the state covered by from severe to exceptional drought. So still not a great drought picture, but of course we have had improvements with the last couple of rainfall events. So that's something to be thankful for. Now let's take a look at the winter outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center. This is for the December through February time frame. We can see for temperature we have an increased chance of above normal temperatures for our winter season. Now for precipitation we get the dreaded EC designation, which means equal chances. Basically equal chances of above, below, or near normal conditions. So in effect, no forecast attempted on precipitation. Now let's take a look at the U.S. seasonal drought outlook. This covers basically current period through the end of January. Since we are entering climatologically our driest time of the year, also the La Nina or the El Nino that looked like it was going to develop apparently is not going to, so no help from El Nino. It does look like that drought will persist over much of Oklahoma and really much of the Great Plains and farther out west. Now there is chance for some improvement in southern and southeastern Oklahoma. That doesn't mean complete elimination of drought, but just maybe a better chance that we'll put a few dents in that drought. Again, this outlook is not always the best as you get farther out, but at least for the near future, this is probably what it's going to look like. Same old story, we just need rain and lots of it. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Patchburn grazing, the whole concept began in light of how grasslands developed in North America.
Derek Skasta is a graduate research associate in natural resource ecology and management at Oklahoma State University.
Fires were a naturally occurring process. They occurred variably in space and time, and bison would go to the recently burned areas. And so the plant community essentially is adapted to fire and grazing. And so what we're doing here, we're trying to restore that fire and grazing process. The goal here is to burn the entire pasture every 3 years. But we do that by burning different patches every year. So we rotate fire around. One key characteristic of this type of management is there's no internal cross fences. There's only one external fence, and cattle can select where they want to graze. And what we found is they prefer to graze in the recently burned area, like I'm standing here today.
Derek's research shows patchburn grazing not only benefits the plant community, but can also have a dramatic impact on a major pest for cattle, horn flies.
So last year we looked at horn flies during their peak levels of activity, which are typically the warmer periods of the year. And we compared that to areas that had no fire. And we found that we had a 41% reduction of horn flies in this patch burning style of management compared to where they weren't burning.
Hornflies are considered the #1 external parasite for the beef cattle market in the U.S. Usually there's an economic impact of around $1 billion to $900 million annually that hornflies cause to the beef cattle market, both in production losses and considering the control cost involved in trying to keep a hornfly population down. When you consider some of these impacts, one main one is the weight gain impact. So when you get above 200 hornflies per animal, we get an economic impact of those animals losing 1.5 pounds on a weekly basis when compared to those that are being protected by hornflies.
Justin Talley is an extension livestock entomologist with Oklahoma State University. He says insecticide-impregnated ear tags and insect growth regulators are the most common way of dealing with this pest. But those are expensive, and insects are developing resistance.
What impacts that resistance is that hornflies go through 25 to 32 different generations in a year. So that's 32 different hornfly populations that are developing on that animal within one summer. And they're feeding 20 to 30 times a day. So they're taking a blood meal 20 to 30 times a day.
This makes Derek's research all the more valuable.
When we started looking at the data, it was amazing when we saw the reduction in hornfly counts just on a patch burn basis. So there's no chemical inputs on these animals. The only thing that was different from the animals was the burning program, where it was patch burn or versus no burning at all. And when you reduce that by 40%, that's getting it below that 200 hornflies per animal, and all year long consistently. So it's highly significant, number one, because it gives you another option when you incur insecticide resistance. And when that occurs, you need other tools other than insecticides to reduce your hornfly population.
Okay, and you and your team study hornflies all the time and make that research and information available to producers on your website?
Yes, we do. We do a hornfly demonstration trial every year. So we compare different ear tag products every year. We try to move it around the state a little bit to give exposure to different hornfly populations. This year it was in Stillwater. But we have all these product demonstrations online at livestockbugs.okstate.edu, and it goes back to 2009. It has other hornfly control measures as well on that website.
Okay, big issue and some good advice today. Justin Talley, our Extension Livestock Entomologist, thanks a lot. And for a link to that website, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
For those Oklahoma cow-calf herds that have fall calving, we're only about a month away from the start of the breeding season, which normally takes place the last week of November or the first part of December. This year, with the heat that we had this summer, I think it's more important than ever that we have our bulls checked by our local veterinarian. Schedule a time to have a breeding soundness exam done on bulls, even those that you've used in the past, and certainly any new bulls that you've purchased. Because of the heat, we know that there may be some bulls that have lower semen quality for about 8 weeks after the heat stress is over. We hope, of course, that the nicer weather we've had in late September and through the month of October, that we're back to normal. But it's still, I think, worth the time, the effort, and the money to have a breeding soundness exam done on the bulls. When you take your bull into the local veterinarian, expect that they will do basically 4 different exams. Number 1 is the general health exam, where they'll look at the eyes, the feet, the legs, the body condition, and the general health of the bull. Then there will be an external reproductive tract exam, where they'll examine for any possible swellings, infections, problems that may cause infertility or subfertility in that bull. There will also be an internal exam that'll be done rectally, so that they can again examine for any possible signs of swelling, infections that might change the quality of the semen. Last but certainly not least, there will be the collection of the semen and the semen evaluation, where they take a sample, look at it underneath the microscope. They will determine the percentage of those cells that are forwardly motile, and then they will stain a sample and look for individual cells. They need a high percentage of normal cells versus a low percentage of those that are misshapen or abnormal cells. All of these things then will be used to evaluate the bull. He will be classified as either satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or classification deferred. That particular situation may occur some this year with the heat stress that we've had, where some bulls will be changing and improving their semen quality over time, and that's especially true of young bulls. So don't be surprised if that does happen. We want to get that done in time, that if we have a bull that does not pass the breeding soundness exam, that we can go and purchase a replacement and have him acclimated to our farm and ranch and ready to go for that upcoming breeding season in late November, early December. This year, I think it's as important as ever before to contact your local large animal veterinarian, schedule a time to have breeding soundness exams done on your bulls, and save that calf crop that we want to be able to have available to sell next year. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Kim Anderson, our grain marketing specialist, joins us now. And Kim, the big story this week, corn prices and projections for the 2013 crop. We need you to sort it out for us.
Well, I've seen 3 different reports this week, and all 3 reports project that we're going to have increased planted acres on corn next year, that if we have even slightly below trend line yields, that we could rebuild corn stocks in the 2013-2014 marketing year up to 1.8 to 1.9 billion bushels. And I think a good part of this is because we're used to the United States was a major corn producer. We're still a major corn producer, but you've got a lot of corn being raised now in Argentina and Brazil and other countries.
Okay. Now, of course, we want to talk about wheat prices and the latest there.
Well, wheat prices continue to wallow around with that December contract in that sideways pattern between $8.69 and $9.57. Like we talked about last week, we did move into the upper half of that. Corn is moving in a sideways pattern from $7.32 to $7.76 on the December contract on Chicago. And then, of course, the July contract on wheat, which a lot of producers are watching, it broke the $9 resistance, and it's got resistance at $9.15.
Okay. A lot of chatter from farmers and other people in the industry, prediction of significantly higher wheat prices. What's your take on that? You've been running the numbers.
I went back to look at the numbers. I think 2008 was an anomaly. If you look at the last 5 years, from a little over that, from June 1 of 2007, there was wheat prices in Oklahoma above $9 with 70 days, are 5.2%, 1 out of 20 chance. Above $10, 30 days, 2.2% of the marketing days time. Above $11, 15 days, 1.1%, and above $12, 3 days, 0.2%. In other words, prices, they could go higher. The odds are just against prices going above $10, and really against them going above $12.
Okay. Keeping that in mind, then, your advice for forward contracting for harvest delivery.
Well, producers can forward contract for about60 cents under that July contract, about $8.40. If you'll look at the percent time the market's been above $8.40, about 7% of the time, I think it's a pretty good deal. There's some risk in it, because if we don't produce wheat, prices could go up. If they've got crop insurance, they've got price insurance up to $8.78. You know, you're less than 5% that a chance that prices are going to be above that. So forward contract some wheat, as long as you got insurance.
Okay. And speaking of which, those deadlines, you want to briefly mention those for farmers.
Western Oklahoma, extreme west, after it's got to be planted by November 15, and the rest of Oklahoma November 30. Check with your insurance agent to make sure you got the right date.
Okay, will do. Kim Anderson, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk about corner posts and bracing those corner posts so that they don't pull out of the ground. Typically you drive around the country and you'll see some corner posts. They may have this H brace in here, but what we're doing is we're pulling wire. So if this is on my corner and this is my brace post here, if I'm pulling this wire, I've got this force that this post is trying to endure, and so without support, I'm going to pull my post over. So I put this in here, but then what happens is my post starts to come out of the ground. It actually will start to pull it up. So we start to do this and we'll put this piece in here, but now we've got these forces still. We still have this horizontal force that's pulling on the post, and as that's translated into this, it now puts in a vertical component as well. And so if we've got a really steep angle on this, then we take a lot of that force and we make it go vertical.
Yeah, if you hold up that, Randy, again, you can see where this angle in here, how shallow it is, all right?
Yeah. And so if we go to a longer piece in here, then we've really reduced that angle that happens. And when we reduce that angle,
and you can see we're talking about this angle from here to here. We want to reduce that angle.
And so if we reduce that angle, now that vertical component of that force has been greatly reduced as well, and we've got less force wanting to pull this post out of the ground, and we're still supporting all this force of our wire that we've stretched.
So there are some tips on corner post and how to properly brace.
We'll see you next week on Shop Stop.
Well, it's time once again to talk to our good friend and livestock marketing specialist, Darrell Peel. Darrell, you've been out across the state this week taking a look at what's going on. Let's talk about wheat pasture and what you're seeing.
Well, I think the situation right now could be best described as one where we have a tremendous potential for wheat pasture in Oklahoma. Most of the wheat's planted, most of it's up. The stands are good. The problem is we have no soil moisture to work with, and so without continued timely rains, it's just simply not going to be able to develop that potential. And I think that's the attitude of most producers right now, is that they're kind of holding their breath. They're ready to take advantage of it, whether they're going to use it for cows or for stockers or whatever, but it's not a done deal yet, and so we're still kind of in a wait and see mode.
Okay, let's talk about the market and what that implies for the market.
Well, in terms of the potential out there, particularly for stockers, I'm looking at producers and there's some pretty clear market signals in here. Given the price breaks that are in the market, and these have been there for a while, but they're pretty pronounced right now. You need to look at a wide range of possible stocker programs, particularly if you're looking at sort of the normal winter stocker thing where you're going to come off in late February or early March with maybe 250 pounds of gain. The market signals really favor right now buying a bigger animal than typical, maybe a 550 to 600 pound animal, because most of the money to be made in the feeder cattle or the stocker side is on the heavy end of the feeder cattle. And so you want to capitalize on that part of the market. On the other hand, if you're already thinking about graze out and you're going to planning on owning these cattle through May, then you're going to put 350 or 400 pounds on them. You might want to start with the traditional lighter animal, and you've got time to get into that better value of gain that occurs at the end of the feeder, the stocker enterprise.
All right, so now as we head into the end of the year, give us a rundown of just the different things on your mind, the different things you're watching.
There's a number of factors out there for me that are pretty key right now. We're in a very short-term dynamic market. One of the things I'm watching is we've had sort of a demand cap this year. We've seen some limitations in demand, and so we're watching this box beef market very closely. I expect to see choice box beef break the $2 barrier, potentially right away, if not sometime in the next few weeks or into early next year. The other thing I'm watching right now, from a feeder supply standpoint, is these Mexican cattle imports. On a week-to-week basis, they have dropped off dramatically from the record pace that we were on in the first half of the year. Looks like those numbers are going to tighten up a lot here at the end of the year, and that's going to have a pretty big impact on feeder supplies as we go into next year.
All right, plenty to keep an eye on and good information as always. Darrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
I'd like to talk this morning a little bit about removing dead or dying trees out of your yard or out of your forest. One of the things we'd like to do with these trees is to use them as firewood. A lot of times there's good firewood left in a tree, even though maybe it has died because of the drought or because of insects or disease. In using a tree for firewood, there are certain things we would like to consider. First, what species is it? Certain species produce better firewood than others. On a dry basis, if we want to say an oven dry pound of wood, mostly has about the same fuel value from one species to the next. However, some trees, as they are somewhat green, have a lot more moisture content. So we'd like to have drier wood. We'd like to use wood that is perhaps easier to split. My own preference is to use a nice straight oak tree because it splits very well and has a high fuel value, does not have a high moisture content. But most other woods are usable in terms of firewood. I would emphasize safety. If you're cutting firewood with an axe or a saw, it is important to follow all the safety rules. It's important to have the right safety equipment. Always have somebody with you to help in case something goes wrong. We'd like for you to be safe and enjoy your firewood throughout the winter time, as it does save on fuel bills, and it's nice to watch your fireplace on those cold winter nights.
Thanks so much for joining us this week. Remember, you can see us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Lyndall Stout, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.